Hello, everyone. Welcome to Atheist Edge. I've got a really exciting panel, exciting topic today. We're going to jump right into it, not beat around the bush. We're going to start with plugs. We'll go ahead and start with Tracy Barkley from Keto and Crime. If you tell us who you are and where we can find you.
My name is Tracy Barkley. I run the Keto and Crime YouTube channel. If you like true crime, if you like history, if you like movie reviews, I'm your gal. You can find me at Keto and Crime, spelled with two Ks, on YouTube.
Kelly, Godless Granny.
I'm Kelly Pearsall or Godless Granny, either one. My channel is Godless Granny. I do atheist content. I also do a lot of political commentary, trans rights, and women's rights.
Heather is our token non-content creator, but maybe that'll change one day. Tell us about yourself. We got some audio issues. Are you muted, Heather? It doesn't look like you're muted. We can't hear you. I'm gonna move to Jenna. You see if you can maybe fix that. Jenna Belk.
Hello. You can find basically all of the stuff that I put out at my YouTube channel, YouTube/Jenna Belk. But I volunteer for the Atheist Experience, since that's where most people know me from, where we discuss, basically it's a call-in show where we talk about what you believe and why.
And you appear also every once in a while on what other shows?
So the ACA has a whole bunch of shows, and I think I've been on all of them a couple of times at least.
Truth Wanted, Talk
Heathen, Secular Sexuality, Nonprofits,
Secular Sexuality,
Godless Bitches.
Is Godless Bitches still a thing?
Not anymore at the moment.
Cool.
It got put on hiatus because of COVID, and then COVID just never ended. So,
all right, Cindy Plaza, The Path to Reason.
Hi, my name is Cindy Plaza. I have a YouTube channel called The Path to Reason, where I talk about skepticism, critical thinking. I'm trying to teach it here in Belgium, where I live. I put together a course on that, and so I'm trying at the moment. But yeah, that's my content: critical thinking, everything that goes around.
Cindy, it's a new channel, so give her extra support and go over and subscribe to Path to Reason, please. She would appreciate all of these ladies would probably appreciate it. I am planning on not talking a whole lot. There's three things that I'm going to accomplish as the host today. One, I'm going to be looking at the live chat. If there's any questions or comments that are pertinent to this topic, I'll be flashing it on the screen. So y'all be looking for that. I won't even break the conversation. Two, I've got 7 questions of my own. If I don't get to them, that's fine. If there's a lull in the conversation, I might try to shoehorn in 1 or 2 every once in a while. 3, Cindy Forish, a fan of the show. She's been a guest of the show twice. She really wanted to make this panel and couldn't make it, just as scheduling. But she did take time to write out a lengthy email, and I promised I would read it in its entirety. So that's the only thing I have to get to, because I've made a promise. So at some point, I'm going to switch over. I'm going to read that whole email. If the panel would maybe just, if you want to jot notes while I'm just going to power through the whole email, you can jot notes and maybe comment on it afterwards. Other than that, let's start with definitions, and anyone can start it. It makes no difference to me. What is toxic masculinity? What are we talking about here? What's the definition?
I'll start. In my opinion, and I've also looked at the dictionary definition, I would say toxic masculinity is when masculine traits, and it can even go for as a true crimer, I know that there's also such a thing as toxic femininity when it comes to family annihilators and things like that. So I would say that in either case, it's traditional masculine stereotypes taken to a point that they become toxic and harmful to both those that exhibit them and others around them.
To me, toxic masculinity is just the attitude that masculinity is superior to femininity.
Guys, I'm going to be really quiet during this. Oh, you know what? I will take an opportunity. I'm going to ask my first question. All right. So, like I said, if I feel a lull in the activity, okay. We hear this all the time. Gaslighting, is that a specifically masculine trait, or is that ubiquitous to all genders? And if it is specifically masculine, what is its origin? Is it nurture or nature? Is it genetic or is it cultural? And what is gaslighting?
Well, go ahead, Cindy. I'll go after you.
Yeah, I want to answer that question about nature and nurture. I would say that it's probably 95% nurture. Toxic masculinity is a behavior, is a mentality, and as such, it's learned and can be unlearned. So we need to be careful when we talk about those topics about not to assign this as a character trait on the person, but as truly as a behavior and a way of thinking. But again, it's learned and it can be unlearned.
Gaslighting, I had to look this up because I'd heard the term a couple of times and didn't originally know what it was. And it originally comes from a movie where a man was trying to convince his wife that she was losing her mind. And he did it by lighting the gas lamps. And then when she insisted that they were lit, he would blow them out and say, no, they're not. See, they're not. And he was trying to convince her that she was wrong, even though she was right. And I have experienced that a couple of times. Part of the issue with gaslighting is people can do that without even realizing that they're doing it, because they may perceive that something happened and they'll say, this is what happened. And the way to handle that is you've got to talk about, okay, this is what I perceived and this is what you perceived, instead of coming at someone with this is what I perceived, therefore your perception is wrong. It's when you get to your perception is wrong that you've come to gaslighting. But I definitely do not see this as a masculine trait, because I have seen it from women just as much as I have from men.
Yeah, I think that's what the term mansplaining is for. But I think that's a subcategory of gaslighting.
Yeah.
But Godless Granny, you said it's basically ubiquitous. It's not just masculine trait. So, and Jenna said a subcategory of that, a subset of that is mansplaining. So, given both of those, is there such thing as womansplaining? Or we never hear that term.
There's lesbiansplaining. as a member of the LGBT community, I can.
We have so many diverse perspectives here. This is so awesome. Yeah. Tell us how it is in the lesbian community, Tracy.
Well, I mean, it really comes down to the subject, but I've been subjected to, okay, we're going to have to dip into stereotypes here. There's a lot of, how do I say this without coming off to like a total B? There are some lesbians in the lesbian community that have more what would be traditional male attributes, that are more into, I know lesbians that can build you a house, by themselves with no help. And when it comes to what I call lesplaining, it's my own term. I'm not saying it's mainstream. When it comes to things that they know about, and this is just with, them in general, they will lesplain you to death about that. So I've just experienced it. So I know it's out there. So I don't think it's ubiquitous to men, the type of, that kind of thing. I think anybody can be a splainer when it comes to something that they think they're an expert on.
Heather, unmute and let's see if your audio is fixed.
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Yes.
Excellent. So let's get back to you. So our token non-content creator that we hope will very shortly become one. Tell us about yourself.
So I am a newly deconverted Christian. I am now an atheist. It's about 6 months into my new life. Very few people know. I'm still walking that path, but it will get there eventually. So
Yeah,
that's where I am.
congrats. I said congrats earlier, and like I acted all excited, and I realized that this is not as exciting for most people right as they're going through it. And I'm just curious how you're doing.
Oh, I'm doing just fine. You know,
Okay.
I'm at that point that everyone can believe what they want to believe. I've just seen information that truly turned me around.
Good for you.
Welcome.
Jim, if this is off topic, just delete the question. But I'm curious, Heather, as to what it was that caused you to see your way out of the maze.
I was gonna ask you, so we all want to know.
Okay, so I met Jim last year when we worked on the census, and he told me he was an atheist. And I thought to myself, oh my goodness, I don't know that I've ever met an atheist. So, as a Christian, you know, in my mind, I'm like, okay, I'm going to take up this challenge. And I even called a lay pastor at my church that I'm friends with and said, okay, I think there's a purpose in this. I'm not sure what it is, but, you know, and he's a apologetics kind of dude. So I started collecting the books and started reading. And then one day it was like, okay, in order to know how to approach Jim, I've got to sit inside of his sandbox. And I thought, you know, I am secure enough in my faith that I feel strong enough to do that. I never once thought I wouldn't get out of that sandbox. But Jim started, you know, he's like, okay, so you need to start listening to, help me out, Jim. Who was the first one?
Truth Surge.
Truth Surge.
I turned her on to the 37 part video series by Truth Surge on the NT Tomb, and it compares Mark with Homer's Odyssey. I thought that might be a good place to start because he's a very mild-mannered speaker, and it's 37 little short clips, so she can digest it, you know, at the way she wants. Yeah. Anyway, continue.
Interesting.
So that just, you know, started blowing the doors open, and then
Yeah.
Very good.
said I needed to jump back out there and start looking things up. And, you know, I would start throwing questions back to Jim. And I'm sure Jim was like, woman, go away from me. But he kept giving me more people, you know, to go and listen to. And the more research I did, you know, the emotional roller coaster starts where you feel like you've been lied to and you've been deceived and all of the whole gamut your entire life. But what I realized was I wasn't lied to. I wasn't deceived. They truly believe what they believe. But I never once questioned my faith.
Mm-hmm.
So once I really put the focus on questioning and learning, then there was no going back. I mean, once you can't unhear and you can't unsee what you know in your mind.
Yeah.
I agree with you. I had a similar, my first, I was raised in a very conservative, fundamentalist Pentecostal family. And what really started me thinking is when and it actually comes back to our topic. I originally wanted to be a pastor way back when I was a kid. And I was told I couldn't because I was a female. So that was my first brush with toxic masculinity. And I don't think, and I believe that was definitely learned. It's learned because of the scriptures that they're taught. And my grandfather actually believed that. And he actually told me that I could be a teacher, I could be a nurse, all these traditional female roles.
Stay in your lane.
Stay in my lane. And so that was what really got me questioning, okay, why would a loving God immediately, you know, make one of his creations less than? And that's what started me on my path to reason.
Or why would a God gift a woman in the area of being a pastor, a preacher, a teacher, and then say, okay, but you can't use that?
Mm-hmm.
Absolutely. I came across so many things because I was very active in my church and very involved and led ministries and leadership and all that stuff. And, you know, I attended Bible study, and the things that they would just gloss over in Bible study hit me so hard from my childhood that, you know, it was like you're punching buttons, and now I truly get it. this is where it's just accepted and it's okay. Incest in your family is just fine. Being sexually abused is just fine. Being, stepped on and stepped over is just fine because you're a woman. And it's not. It's
Mhm.
just flat not. And I ran up against that in church as well. My hands serve just as good as anybody else's, but no, they don't. I'm not a
Yeah.
man.
You should have seen my pastor's face when I brought him the story of Lot and his daughters.
Yes, I
Do
use that all
you
the
know what
time.
happened here?
What? I
I'm
know.
just I
And they're
pointed
like,
to it. I'm like, he just had sex with his daughters, and he just, oh no, 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 you're misreading it.
oh,
That's
yeah.
not what happened. I'm like, I think
And that was
I don't
only
think that was
after
right.
he offered them up to the crowd in the street.
Exactly.
Yeah, to save the men. Right.
Mhm.
Mm-hmm.
He didn't just have sex with them. He was sexually assaulted by them.
He was sexually assaulted
Yes,
by them. Yeah,
because
Yes.
they got him drunk. I'm like, yeah, whatever.
Yeah.
that
Yeah.
but that was okay because it was preserving his seed. That's what my pastor ultimately said
Yes.
to me.
Whatever. Whatever.
If you attempt to justify that in any form or fashion, you have just identified yourself as someone I don't want to have contact with. That's
Yeah.
What was I going to? Oh, this might be a good time, just so I don't forget. And Cindy Forrest would kill me because I promised I would read this. She's the fan of the show. She's been on the show a couple times. She very much wanted to be a part of this panel, so she took the time out to write an email. And if you would indulge me, I'm just going to power through the whole thing. If you all want to scribble little notes and then maybe comment on it afterwards. Here we go. Are men toxic? No. The idea that men are toxic as a whole is wrong, damaging, and misguided. Do some men have toxic behaviors and character traits? Yes. However, if we look at the toxicity in some men, we also have to look at the toxicity in some women. Neither gender is inherently better or worse than the other ethically. The toxic traits and behaviors of bad men versus bad women are often manifested in different ways, but I believe they are rooted in the same flawed character traits. For example, let's look at selfishness/entitlement. Some men think that they are entitled to sex just because they're spending money on a woman. Some women might think they're entitled to a man's money because she has sex with a man. Even worse are men and women think they are entitled without doing anything at all. I'm only going to, and then she goes on to discuss two issues, one pertaining to men and one pertaining to women. I'll jump down to that. Sexual abuse. These are very horrific crimes. They often leave the victims scarred and broken. However, not all men sexually assault or rape women or support anything that indicates that. I know there is a current push for a belief that and this is the hashtag all men thing. We could talk about that too, are accountable for sexual assault. It's simply not true. People are ultimately only accountable for the things they do. Some things are only inappropriate if the woman isn't attracted to the man. However, if she's attracted even before knowing him, a lot of women will enjoy the same things from that man. Don't get it twisted. I'm not talking about blatant sexual assault or rape. I'm speaking about compliments or looking at a woman a certain way. We need to be careful what we call sexual assault and rape for two reasons. If we label everything we don't like as sexual assault, we are watering down the real victims. Okay. And then the one that pertains to women is child custody. She points out this issue shows the bias of the court system in favor of women. I'm not including deadbeat dads in this argument. I'm referring to men that willingly want to be a dad. There are some women that seek to exact revenge on their ex by keeping him away from his children. This is really kidnapping unless the father is unfit, plain and simple. Women that do this are causing the father great pain and hurting their children. Before anyone tries to say that this pain is not as great, just try to think of someone coming to your home and kidnapping your kids, and the court doesn't even try to help you get them back. I've heard so many stories of men having court-ordered visitations, but the mother blocks it and the police do nothing to help. So all in all, some in both genders are toxic. Simply pointing the fingers at men and saying toxic is misguided at best and evil at its worst. Men are not toxic because they are men. To judge all men on the actions of some men is sexist. And
Amen, sister.
Amen, sister.
really, I said this before we went live. My prediction was I was going to have trouble finding the centrist and possibly the right-leaning positions regarding this topic. and I was going to have an easy time finding the extreme left position on this topic. And in reality, it turned out to be exactly the opposite. So,
Which is left,
yeah.
which is right.
Left is
Um,
liberal, right is the conservative.
So which would be the liberal view of
I
masculinity?
expected the vocal far left to be jumping at the chance to come on a topic like this. And I expected those that lean center or right on the issue. I'm not talking MRAs or MGTOWs. You guys know those. We can talk about those if we want, but MGTOWs, men going their own way, or the men's rights advocates, I consider that an extreme right mentality. But I thought that those would be harder to get, the centrists. It seems like so far, it might be, it might, we might find some fireworks later in the show, but it seems like we're kind of all on the same page, as at least right now. But does anyone have any comments on what Cindy Forish wrote? And then if not, we can move on.
I totally agree with her. I think, especially what she said about child custody, I would have been much better off had I been raised by my father than my mother. My mother my biological mother is a very toxic individual. If you put up a stereotype of a toxic feminine person, she was it. She was very ultra feminine. She was very into beauty for the sake of beauty, that kind of thing. She wanted me to be just like her. She wanted to mold me in the way that she wanted me to be. And if you look at me, I'm not, I'm not a Barbie doll. Would never be anything like that. And then of course she disowned me when I came out as gay. But my father, who was a Marine Corps veteran, who was, would have been stereotypical considered a good old boy, was actually much more forward thinking than her, had a much more nurturing side to him. And I would have been much better off being raised by him than her. But, they divorced in the late 70s, and it was very much a child needs their mother above all. And she did weaponize custody of me to get revenge on him. And I would have been much better off had he been in my life.
I work with this. I'm a CASA volunteer. And so I work with children who either are in custody of DHR, or they've been safety planned with a family member because there's issues in the family. And we used to also do cases where there was a divorce and the judge was simply concerned that the child's voice was not being heard, and so they would appoint a CASA to represent the child. We don't do that anymore for financial reasons, because CASA gets a huge grant from a crime victims advocate group, and they won't give us that money anymore if we are involved in private cases. We can only be involved in DHR cases now. So, but I have had some issues where I have worked with men that their complaint was that they were not getting visitation with their kids, and I have helped them to try to get more visitation with their kids, or try to smooth things over between, so that the parties would be more agreeable and more amenable to both parties visiting. One of the biggest mistakes I ever made on a case, though, was one where both of the parents were really a mess. But dad married a woman that really was capable of taking care of these kids. And I really pushed for dad to get custody of the kids, because I knew that she would be a better influence than either one of the parents. And so the judge gave the kids to the father. And as soon as the case was over, he divorced her. He only married her so he could get custody of those kids. And yeah, that was the biggest mistake I made as a CASA, siding with a parent so that a step parent could be involved in their lives. So I've seen it both ways. And in most of the cases that I work, we either can't find the fathers deny that these are their kids. The fathers wanting to have visitation and wanting to be involved are the exception. I don't know how many fathers I've called and said, hey, your child is in DHR custody. Would you like to be involved in this case? They said, nope, leave me out of it.
I don't want to put you. Go ahead, Tracy.
Oh, I should say, and that's unfortunate for the kids like me that would have wanted to been better off with their dad. The deadbeats ruin it for the good ones. It seems that that's just, it's like one apple spoils a barrel kind of thing. And it's really sad.
It's interesting because there's plenty of bad moms.
There are.
Yes.
There are.
Yep.
Mhm.
So
I just wanted to add that the reason why we associate toxic masculinity or toxicity in general to men is because toxic masculinity is usually one of the tools and one of the parts when a man is trying to control a relationship, whether it's regular relationship or even religion. Religion is based on control, and it's one of the tools like gaslighting is one of the tools used by religion. But yeah, the reason why it's associated to men is because it's one part of the abusive relationships, and usually those are caused by men. But again, as everyone said so far, it's not. We shouldn't generalize this because it's across the board.
I would agree. I like Harmonica Man's question here. So, is there a standard level to measure as toxic, or does it vary by others' perceptions? So, being in a toxic relationship, because you can't, what we're talking about is interactions with other people, and the level of toxicity can go either way. I think we've all agreed upon that. Does it vary by the other's perceptions? Well, in my opinion, we attract and tolerate the same type of people that we are. So if I have a propensity to like a guy that's over demanding, over controlling, whatever it is, and I'm willing to put up with that, I'm going to attract them. That's going to be my quote unquote kind of man. Well, if one party is quote unquote toxic and the other party is less toxic or not at all, because I've stepped into relationship a few times and went, oh hell no, and then you beeline it because it's not anybody that I should even be involved with because they do have toxic traits. It's a matter of how much you value yourself and what you're willing to put up with. And I know that there are situations out there that women are trapped in, and I wish there was an easy answer for that. There's not. It's not an easy answer. It's a matter of what you're willing to tolerate.
I come into that question a lot on doing true crime stories, especially for men that annihilated their whole family
Mhm.
for one reason or another. It's always starts with domestic or verbal emotional abuse. And then I get so many comments, why didn't she just leave? And I'm like,
Right.
it's not that simple.
It's
It's
not.
not that simple. She believes this is where she should be. And oftentimes the only way it ends is through death of one party or another. Either the woman has a moment of clarity where she does the deed, such as, the whole burning bed scenario, let's say, or
Hmm.
there's a point when the man just takes it to the limit and kills the woman. I mean, it usually ends that way.
And I'm not an expert on this, but I do have a friend who is extremely passionate about the subject, and I've been to a couple of her events. And apparently, the death of the person is after the typically she leaves.
Mhm.
So they do
Yep.
leave,
Yep.
and that's when the death occurs. So it's not like it's obviously not that simple. Yeah.
No,
I read
it's-
one book on the topic where this expert was saying that when a woman does decide to leave, that is the most dangerous time for her.
Right.
That
It is.
if she decides to leave and starts to leave, that's far more dangerous for her than just staying.
Mm-hmm.
And oftentimes they don't have support. You really have to have support to get out. I covered a case where it was two women, but eventually the one of the partners eventually killed the other partner, or she's missing. I mean, we kind of see the writing on the wall. So it's just, it doesn't matter what the genders are that are involved. It's often that the partner that's being abused has to have support to get out. And this poor woman had nothing. She had been alienated from her family. Her partner had kept her completely isolated from her family, had even had her file a restraining order on her mother and stepfather for practically no reason. I mean, just, she was isolated. And that happens more often than not. And then when they finally do leave on their own, they have nowhere to go, and then they easily get tracked down and they're hunted, for lack of a better way.
Open
And I
question
also
to
believe a
anybody
lot of
on the screen.
How do you work to dismantle sexism? Very good question.
I think the first step is being able to recognize it. And I say that because I know that I have lived with a lot of it without realizing it. I've told a couple people the story of some of the sexism and sexual assault that I would observe in the workplace as a 17-year-old. And when I related this to an aunt, my aunt told me, this is sexual harassment, and I didn't even know the meaning of that term. It was at least 10 years later before I finally understood why a customer leaving me $1 for a 35-cent cup of coffee and expecting a date in return was sexual harassment. I just didn't understand that. So I would say that the first issue is just being able to recognize it.
I can speak to having been in the military, worked in professional kitchens, and being a stand-up comedian. I've worked in very, very male-dominated industries, and I think a lot of it, just like we heard it, the perception, maybe like the point you speak, a lot of it I probably didn't realize was sexual harassment at the time it was happening, just because of my perception. But how did I dismantle it? I was bent over on the line in one restaurant that I worked over, getting something out of the cooler, and my fellow line cook, who was a man, came up behind me. I was much, this is in my younger days, rubbed his, member on my backside. I simply stood up, turned around, and slugged him right in the nose. It dismantled it really quickly. But a lot of women didn't do that, won't do that. And so it goes on. A lot of people won't do that. I think toxic masculinity goes both ways in this scenario. There are probably a lot more men that are on record that are also abused in relationships, and they won't speak up because they think it's not masculine to do so. So it really preys on both genders, I think.
I think the most important part in this is to explain. And in my opinion, the best way to explain why it's problematic is to try and change the roles. Like, would you like if this were done to you, and try to put things in perspective? That's often the best way to teach why it's a problem.
Mm-hmm.
So something that I recognize in myself is that I, quote unquote, mansplain too. That's actually something that my partner and I will catch ourselves doing to each other at times, where we're both doing it to each other. And I'm like, in our relationship, it's not mansplaining. It's just explaining something that you shouldn't be explaining,
Mm-hmm.
So
is there a more gender neutral term that we could use in its place?
Condescending.
Yeah, it's straight and simple, right? Because there are a certain percentage of men that hear manspreading, mansplaining, and they rebound. It's like it's like an autonomic rebound effect. Like, why are you coming after me? But if it was a more homogenous term, it could apply to anybody based on any situation.
Well, I mean, depending on anybody's environment, people can start doing things like that and not realize that they're doing it. And so I think that the best way that, for example, that I, not as any expert on the topic, dismantle it in my own life is by pointing it out when I see it, and not in an attacking way.
I think the difference is that, you know, yes, both men and women can be condescending, but if the man, and this isn't all men, but if the man also has the attitude that as a male I am superior to all females, which I have seen in many men, that's when it becomes mansplaining.
Yes, that's what I was going to say. Yeah,
Oh, sorry.
condescension alone is no, it's okay. Condescension alone is not enough. You need to explain something like you believe that the person doesn't know it because she's a female. That's mansplaining.
Yeah.
So can we give an example?
Oh, I've got a doozy. My husband once asked me if I know what liquid soap is.
Oh. Oh. Oh.
I'm
Oh,
not.
like here, let
Is
me
there a
show
deeper
you how to
meaning? Because
pump
I'm
the
not
gas
catching
on
it.
this car.
Yeah, he gave me a shopping list, and liquid soap was one of the items on the list. Do you know what liquid soap is? That, yeah, and I know what the car is, and I know what the keys are, and I know what the store is, and I know how to get there. And
I can count my money too.
I also can earn my own money. Put it all in the bank
Look.
myself.
And you can go buy your own liquid soap.
Yeah.
I think Purple Rhyme put a great comment in there earlier where she says that she felt compelled to protect the children. Going back to what we were talking about earlier, I think that is a lot of reason why sometimes the female partner does not leave an abusive relationship. They feel they can't make it with the kids, and also they feel they need to protect the kids, you know, from the abuser. And I find that's often a recurring thing in most of the cases that I cover, that they were staying for the kids. And often, and you see it when a man kills, usually in a lot of the famous cases, Chris Watts, Jeffrey McDonald, all of them, they not only kill the wife, they kill the kids too. So I think it's just the woman feels necessary to be the protector of the kids lots of times. But when women kill, like just for the sake of killing, if a woman is a sociopath or a psychopath, she often ends up like Susan Smith, Andrea Yates. There was a lot of mental illness there. They often just end up killing the children, not the male. It's a very interesting, not the husband. It's just a very interesting dichotomy. They will kill the children, but not the partner. Whereas men usually wipe out the whole family when it's a true what I call criminal type of case. It's just very weird. I've just noticed that.
I also find it very interesting that more men are sexually deviant than women.
What do you mean?
So, more men prey on children or rape, aggressive type of behavior than women. It's not common to find a woman that preys upon children or teenagers.
It's not?
So, what is
No.
that?
It's basically testosterone. It's responsible. Responsible maybe is the bad word, but testosterone tends to create more dominant behaviors in all mammals, not just humans. It's biological. That doesn't excuse the behavior. It's just explain it.
Yeah.
Never thought of that. Thank you, Cindy.
I'll throw a nice curveball. You do see some cases, and it's normally like a female teacher preying on students,
Right.
Like a Pam Smart or somebody like that. Is it not equal because they don't actually do it as much, or is it not equal because oftentimes the boys will not speak up? Is
No,
that
clearly.
another symptom of toxic masculinity? And I'm not saying that thread was off. I've just always wondered that myself. Is it not more prevalent because somebody's not speaking up because they feel, oh, I'm banging a hot teacher, without, for lack of
And
a
it
better
could
way to
be.
put it, than, or than rather seeing themselves as victims? I've just always wondered that. That is a question that I think of weird things. It's just questions that have often popped into my head. Not saying that Cindy is wrong. I think Cindy's right on the money, but
Cindy did point out earlier we were talking and there was a consensus that it was 95% nurture. But Cindy's talking about testosterone as, nature, a natural cause. So is testosterone in and of itself? This is a great segue. I'm going to ask this question now. It's number 7. To all of you, what would a world, you guys seen that new series, which I read the graphic novels years ago, I still have them all, is The Why, The Last Man. So, I mean, decades ago, I read the graphic novels. So it's just now an actual television series. I forget what streaming service. So what would a world without completely void of men look like? How would it be different? No testosterone, well, the little testosterone that you all produce. But a world
I'm
without
not
someone
gonna
who's
like that
predominantly
world.
run by testosterone.
I think it would die out quickly unless
Yeah, it
we
would.
find a way to reproduce.
I assume that we have frozen sperm that we
Yeah.
can use at any point.
Yeah.
Let's say 500 years, 1,000 years in the future, sexual reproduction becomes antiquated. Let's just go ahead and throw that in there. And what would a world look like?
I would just like to point out that I used a very specific word when I talked about testosterone. I said tends to.
Yes,
Uh,
tens.
yeah, that's a very important difference, because it's not a necessary condition. It just overall it tends to increase those type of behaviors.
And I think, Cindy, if you take that example of high testosterone and you add that with a genetic defect such as, I don't know, bipolar, whatever, that goes undiagnosed, then you have the mixture of a Molotov cocktail in a human being.
I think a big part of it is that the testosterone makes men biologically more aggressive, but the toxic masculinity, the attitude that men are superior, that's the nurture. The aggression is nature. The attitude that men are superior is the nurture.
I would agree.
Absolutely.
An entirely female world would there be less wars, for instance?
Yes,
Depends on how you define war.
that's true.
Kinetic conflict between nation states.
Then I don't know. I don't think so.
Well, often wars are more, I think, well, I know
so
that
this
they
is
are usually products of greed.
I mean, I've grown up basically so again, not an expert in anything of any kind. I'm fascinated by human behavior, and I've just grown up watching people, and I've always tried to figure out, how does a dude act? How does a chick act? I don't really get it. So I've got to take notes. Right. And there are these little ideas that, girls are more gossipy, and I'm like watching groups of guys, and I'm like, they're just as gossipy,
Yeah.
like, I don't get it, so it's like I don't know, I think it just depends on what label you put on it.
I think the tendency to be violent, territorial, and tribal, in addition to greed, which usually causes most wars, at least most modern wars, I think that's a human condition. I don't think it's necessarily a male condition. So I don't know if there would be less wars. We might redefine what a war is in that world.
Well, mother instinct.
Yeah.
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 I think because women tend to be more cat fight than knockdown drag fight,
Depending on how you define it, yeah.
the way we would see conflict would be very different than what we see in today's world.
This is Atheist Edge. I'll pull a little religion into it. So it is my understanding that the basal human condition is to have a tendency to believe in a divine intelligent agent. It gives you comfort. It gives you hope. It gives you a bulwark against fear of death and dying in the unknown. So I think there is a evolutionary reason why the majority of people still believe in these fairy tales. But logic and transcending that, because we have a prefrontal cortex now, we can transcend that basal urge. It could be said that some men have, when they see a pretty woman walk by, there's a, in the base of in their R complex, their lizard brain, there's an urge to just hit her over the head with a club and drag her into your cave still. I think for some men, they still find it a challenge to transcend that urge, if they still have that urge, or maybe it's vestigial. So if testosterone is a causal agent in aggression and warlike behavior, our prefrontal cortex, like any other vestigial basal urge that we've ever had in primitive culture, we can transcend it. I guess
Yeah, I
that's
think
more a statement than a question,
identify.
but yeah.
Somebody has to want to do something about it.
But if someone wants something so badly, they can reason their way into it.
Oh, sure.
You know, if you want to go to war with this person or fight this person or do something deadly or do something to this person, you can reason your way into it. You know, no matter how much logic you can kind of facilitate your own logic there. But yeah, maybe overall we can eventually. I mean, we haven't overcome the need for war in what the thousands of years we've been on this planet. So I don't know. I hope one day we can transcend that. I really do. But it hasn't proven to be true as of yet.
I like Maya's comment here. She says the evolutionary component is not to believe in a higher power, but to go with the tribe, whatever the society that the person was born into believes most in it will adhere to. And I think that's only half of the issue. Evolutionarily, we are programmed to believe into what our parents tell us. So any source of perceived authority will have a natural advantage on people. So when God is presented and taught as a figure of authority and knowledge and all that, then that's why it's so easy to believe in a God, because we are taught to believe in father figures and authority figures. Because kids who don't listen to their parents, they die very quickly in nature.
I'm going to dovetail off of a couple things that were said in the live chat earlier about some negative traits in women. I think earlier the panel was talking about it, some gossiping and some other things, but I think that goes right in line with one of my questions. Is there a corollary, a toxic femininity? And some of the ones that I have found online, I'm not saying if they're real or not, and help me out, guys, using charm to sabotage others, desire for popularity, covering your insults with a veil of kindness and empathy, putting other women down, and feelings of jealousy. Are those founded?
Definitely.
Yeah.
I've told a couple people of an experience that I once had flying on an airplane. It was 20 years ago, or no, it was 30 years ago, because my oldest was an infant. And I had a diaper bag for her, and I put it under the seat in front of me, but about 3 inches of it was sticking out from the seat. And the stewardess came up and, I'm sorry, the flight attendant came up and told me, you can't do that unless you can get that bag completely under the seat in front of you. It has to go in the overhead bin. And I needed it because it had formula in it for my baby. So I didn't want to put it in the overhead bin. And I could not push it any further in. And the flight attendant wouldn't accept it there. The man sitting next to me pulled the bag out and put it in his lap and held it for the entire flight. And the flight attendant was fine with that.
Wow.
Interesting.
I think the way women tend to attack people they don't like is a little different than men. Now, there's some truth to the saying that poison is a woman's weapon. You know,
Mhm.
Mhm.
we tend to be a little more Machiavellian in what we do, rather than just brute, in your face brutality. We might poison a victim instead of shooting them. Not that we can't handle guns either, but
Well,
I think we're just a little slyer about things that we do.
that's actually what I meant about the,
Yeah.
the war between
Mhm.
nations being between women and men. We're still going to need our, resources. We're going to still going to have competitions between each country for whatever reason. So I don't know.
Tracy, Jenna, forgive me. I caught the feeling. I don't know much about you if you're in a same-sex relationship or not, but so I would ask you to if that's the case. Tracy, in a lesbian relationship, does one take on the role of, and forgive my ignorance, please, passive aggressiveness and not really telling someone when they screwed up and just letting them try to guess at it, and the other one saying, calling them on that, or when the other one screws up, like actually saying, "Hey, you screwed up." Is there that kind of dynamic?
Are you asking which one's the man?
Well,
I'm
I
kidding.
think
I'm
this
kidding.
now. Please correct me if I'm wrong, but it seems like the woman is sometimes passive aggressive, and it
No,
might
no,
not
no,
be
no.
ubiquitous.
I'm a
Like
joke. It's a joke. I don't know how
we
it
can
works
go
in
all
all
day, and
lesbian
my
dynamics.
wife and I know there's something wrong, and she knows that she's letting me know that something's wrong, but I'm tap dancing like Michael Flatley all day trying to think what it was I did wrong.
I tend to be more emotional in my relationship than my wife. My wife is very logical. She's very methodical in what she does. She definitely is. She does not hesitate to tell me if I'm messing up or if I'm getting going out of hand. She calls it a cray cray moment for me, and we have an inside joke about that. It's not derogatory at all. She's one of the kindest, sweetest, nicest people that you'd ever want to meet. Also, one of the most beautiful. But she is very much. I would say if you had to put it into those categories, she would be more of the what would be normally considered a husband, role, whereas I'm kind of the other, if you want to break it down into those terms. Now, I can't say all lesbian relationships have that dynamic. I have friends that they still have that dynamic going on, and I don't think it's male and female. We would have to go back and talk about gender roles, and is gender a social construct? And I absolutely believe that it is, because often gender is put into gender roles or assigned to certain genders, which it's just a social construct. I mean, biological sexes, yeah, I'll contend there's only two, maybe three of those if you consider people that are born hermaphroditic. You could say there's three biological sexes, but when it comes to genders, if you study civilizations, every single civilization had a different way they viewed gender roles and genders. So that is absolutely a social construct, in my opinion. And so I can't say that that's true for every lesbian relationship, but most that I know, that dichotomy exists. There's one that would be more traditional male gender roles, and others would be more traditional. And I think it's just a matter of society and how we define things. Did any of that make sense? Because I feel like I was rambling.
Absolutely.
That's interesting. I identify as non-binary. So I'm in a relationship with a person who identifies as a man. The thing is that, it depends, kind of like she was saying about, depends from society to society, is because which gender is it that does the cooking?
Yeah.
Because
Yeah.
he does the cooking for the most part. I mean, I can and I do and I like it, but for the most part, he's the one that does it, so it's like, I mean, it kind of depends on how you look at it. And I don't
by
know.
our societal stereotypes, that's the
Right.
dichotomy that our relationship is broken into.
Right.
But maybe not in reality, if that's the case.
Yeah.
Because I think I like I said, I worked in professional kitchens. Some of the greatest chefs I know are men. And I really think that we're robbing ourselves when we try to pigeonhole, men and women into certain roles. You're missing a lot of talented people.
Cindy, I would be remiss if I didn't try to get a trans person's experience. So, from your perspective, is there a change living your former life and now? Do you see the world differently in all this, the outside influences, or how I'm sure you're treated differently? I don't even know how to word the question. What's your experience now? Is it different than before?
It is. I had this proximity with toxic masculinity because I was in the army, and let's say that I had my fair share of toxic masculinity around me. But the thing is that I already didn't like it at the time, but I couldn't show it because otherwise I was pushed away. Now, it's hard to say because society has changed too in the last 15 years. On this, we are much more aware of all these issues than we used to be at this time. So it's hard to say which is due to social changes or if it's due to my perception. Also, I've been pretty lucky since the transition because I still have my job. I didn't face too many cases of discrimination, but if I base my perspective on just what I saw so far, I would say that toxic masculinity is, in my opinion, at least partially linked to education. And the more the people are educated, and the least they tend to be toxic on both sides, men and women.
Very well put.
I sense a lull, so I'm going to ask you guys. This is kind of like a little game show now. I'm gonna give you a phrase, and you tell me if you're familiar with it and explain it to me. Okay? Patriarchy chicken. Does anyone know what that means?
No.
Oh, whoa! I got a lot of no nods. I just thought for sure one of you would know what it was.
Patriarchy chicken?
Patriarchy chicken.
Is that
It's
like
a game
eating at KFC?
Apparently I had to look it up. It's a game, and I tell me if this serves a purpose, and I think it might, and that's a man speaking. And I didn't realize it until I really was so naive on this subject until like when I learned the game, and then I learned why they're playing the game, and I was like, oh shit, I wasn't even aware men are doing that. And I don't know, maybe it's not just men either. Okay, so a woman will walk down a sidewalk, say, on the right side of the sidewalk if you live in the United States, and apparently there is a phenomenon where men don't get out of the way for women. They expect the woman to move. And so patriarchy chicken is just keep walking. And if you bump into him, it's his fault. And just to let him, it's like a wake-up call to men that just won't get out of the way.
Wait a second.
That's very specific.
I tend to be the one that moves just because I was raised in the South and very polite, so I tend to move if they're a man or a woman and they're coming right at me. So I've never.
But now
had
that I've said that, are you going to be more
that.
keenly aware if specifically men don't get out of your way? If you definitely, like you're in the grocery store and you're definitely on the right side of the aisle and you're going down, and there's someone coming with a cart and they expect you to move your cart to the left side.
The only time I expect people to get out of my way is if it's something like in a traffic situation.
Yeah.
Well,
I usually just take the way to avoid a collision or but
exactly.
Next time I may keep walking right at a man to see if he moves.
Yeah, I'd never expect a guy to get out of my way.
Dovetailing on that.
So you have not experienced that
Never
men
thought
I haven't
about it.
sometimes
noticed.
tend to.
No, I'll probably. It's
I
probably
have
like
I have experienced that men tend to use their bodies more in that respect than a female. The first time I experienced it was when I went to hear Ronald Reagan speak. And as I was leaving the building, I needed to walk back to campus. And the shortest way back to campus was exiting from the rear of the building, which actually was a whole block closer than exiting out of the front. And when I started heading for one of the rear exits, a Secret Serviceman blocked my path because that was not a secure area. The secure area was you could only go out the front door. And it was really interesting because it was obvious he did not perceive me as a threat, but just with a very simple move of his body, he made it very clear, you are not going out this door. and so I went out a different door, and I experienced it again another time when there was a certain man that I was trying to avoid and didn't want to talk to, and I saw him in a hallway, and I tried to slip through a door. I'm a very small person. I can usually do that fairly easily. And when he saw me coming, he took one small step to block the doorway. And I've noticed that men do that. They use their bodies in ways that a woman would, most women that at least in my experience would not do it that way. The woman would have said, hey, wait a minute. They wouldn't have used their body to block the doorway.
Interesting. Were these much larger men? Like larger
Oh,
than
yeah.
you?
Oh, yeah.
So maybe they just kind of were raised with that kind of experience. When people respond to you in a certain way, you tend to develop certain demeanors. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Interesting.
It's like-
Next
like-
one. Or
Well, I
do
was
we
just going to
want
say,
to continue on this? Yeah.
the only thing that I can think of, as far as I'm concerned, where when people experience different, I guess, traffic things between, I guess, male and female, is when. So I grew up here in Texas. It's kind of southern chivalry type thing, and there's the whole idea that a male partner is supposed to stand between the street and the female partner at all times in case a car were to come, then he can block it. I guess. I don't know. I think if you think about that, then it's not like they're going to do much. Probably.
But that's
You're both
funny.
gonna die.
That's funny.
Yeah,
That's
like-
actually my
Like
expectation.
never being before a woman in stairs, always behind in case she falls.
Right, that kind of thing. Well,
yeah.
now my partner actually does that, and that is because I am likely to fall down the stairs. That's not because I'm a chick, though. That's because I'm
But
clumsy.
yeah, but it's based on habits, not
Right.
Funny story along those lines. When I lived in Fort Wayne, gosh, probably about 20 years ago, there was a story in the newspaper of a woman who was hit and killed by a car. And she had been walking with her fiance. And when the car hit her, another car came along and the fiance tried to flag it down, telling that car to, look out because she was laying there in the road. And it didn't stop, and that car ran over her too. And my mom read that story and said, why was she on that side of the street? Why wasn't the fiance on that side of
Right.
the street? Yeah,
Yes.
It's an old fashioned thing.
right.
I've never considered any of that, like the opening of the doors, because I open doors for people too all the time. If I'm like going through a door first and there's somebody 3 or 4 or 5 steps behind me, I will stop and open the door, let them in, and walk in after them. I've never had anybody surprised by that. But I've always found it, I don't know, this may be, but even as somebody that's not necessarily into men, but always found it rather titillating, for lack of a better term, when a man opens the door for me or stands up when I enter a room. I asked my dad about that once, and my dad, as I said, I've talked about him many times. He epitome of a good old boy. When I came out to him as gay, he just said he already knew it. He said, I knew that was just one more thing we had in common, baby girl. And, we were, So, but he always told me it was because out of respect. It wasn't that in his opinion, it wasn't that he was taught that women were naturally frail or anything. It was just a matter of respect. And so I took his words to heart, and that doesn't really bother me. It never has.
It
I don't
has
necessarily
never
consider that
bothered me.
toxic. Yeah. I don't
I
necessarily consider that toxic. Yeah, I agree, Heather. Go
Yeah.
ahead. I'm sorry.
I actually, it's an expectation or an anticipation of a gentleman to open doors for me if we're together. Now, in public, totally different situation, but it's no different than going into a restaurant with a man to sit down to eat. My back will be to the door. He must always be facing that door.
So it's interesting. So the fact that it varies from person to person, I think that that's the best way to show respect to somebody is to learn how they feel respected.
Yes.
Because I don't feel like that at all. But that's just because we're two different people.
Right.
And so it is a relatively new idea to dilate your respect from person to person,
Which is
rather than
incredible, isn't it? In and of
right.
itself, it's incredible.
Yeah.
Heather brought up a good point. Those of you listening in the live chat, you're going to totally agree with me. And if you weren't aware of it before, you're going to go, "Oh my God, I've been doing it my whole life." There is something about sexual dimorphism. The males tend to be bigger and stronger. Now, whether you're like me and you've got like a lifetime of martial arts and law enforcement and military, it doesn't matter. If you're a male, really, it's not a male or female, because in some relationships, the female is bigger and stronger. It's rare, but the protector in the relationship will always sit facing the entrance and a clear view of all the exits. It will be automatic. When you go sit down in a
Mhm.
restaurant, you won't even realize you're doing it. In fact, when sometimes my daughters jump in the back, where I'm going to sit in the booth, I'm like, it feels wrong. Move over here. I'm going to sit with my back to the wall. I got to see the exits. And it's not a military thing, even though Marine for 21 years, but it's a male thing. People with
It's a
no,
protective instinct.
yes. So is sexual dimorphism, we know that's a thing, but does that play a factor in chivalry or not? I wouldn't call it chivalry, but do we look out for each other in different ways?
Yeah, I would say that's how I would term it. I kind of look at that differently. I never like to sit with my back to a door. I never have. Just maybe it's my non-trusting nature, but to me, it's like, okay, I'm going to be the sacrifice if somebody does come through that door and start shooting, because I'm not going to see them. So maybe I'm the human shield for you in that scenario, Jim. So I look at it very, very differently. So, but yeah, I think we just protect people differently in a way. Like, yeah, my wife is the gun. Even though I was in the military, my wife is the gun aficionado and a prepper in our relationship, so to speak. Where I'm the one that works and brings home. So I protect her in a very different way. I'm the one that provides the income and everything. But yet, if push came to shove and somebody came through our door, she's going to be the one standing there with a gun ready to deal with them. So it's very differently, I think, how you protect people.
That's interesting. So the roles are kind of split evenly.
Mhm.
Yeah. Huh. Any more to add on that? I'm going to ask
Jenna
another
needs to
weird
get
question.
going.
Okay. Who's it?
Jenna.
Jenna, you got to go. Oh, I'm missing
I'm
everything in the
sorry.
private chat. I'm so
I'm
sorry. Give us your final thoughts at least, and then give your plugs again.
Thank you. I just new mom hearing screaming baby. Just alarm bells going off. Sorry, my final thoughts on basically the idea is that any gender can be, or sex can be more harmful than another as a whole, I think just depends on how you're looking at it. Because kind of like we had brought up earlier about how girls fight so and so, as they call cat fighting, or more behind the scenes. I think that everybody has their own good and bad sides, and I don't think that I think to narrow it down that way is less helpful, I think, to the conversation. But again, I am no expert on either of these topics. I'm just, I guess I'm an activist. So sorry, I guess it's hard for me to focus right now.
Oh, I'm so sorry. We'll get
okay.
you out of here. Oh, so look for Jenna Belk. We're among royalty. It's the first time you've been on the show. I hope it's not the last. You can find her on Atheist Experience or any of the myriad shows down there in the atheist community of Boston. And thank you. It was an honor to have you on the show.
Thank you for inviting me. I'm sorry.
That's fine.
Jenna,
Bye,
nice to
Jenna.
see you
all of
again.
y'all. You too.
Take care.
Bye.
Okay, guys. I'm going to throw out another term that if you didn't know what that patriarchy chicken is, you're definitely not going to know this one. And I learned it too because I was called it on Facebook about a week ago. I was called a sea lion. Do you know what a sea lion is in relation to this?
No, I know what an actual sea lion is.
Yeah,
Okay.
I read it. I read it once, but I don't remember.
I took offense because it reminded me of what Sean Hannity. Who's the other jackass over on Fox? The one that used to wear bow ties. Come on, help me out.
Riley?
Who's that? Huh? The one that used to wear bow ties. The little fucking guy.
Bob O'Reilly?
No. Tucker
I
Carlson.
never watched.
Oh, Tucker. Okay.
Tucker Carlson is kind of known for, I'm just asking questions, right? And it could be totally sexist and racist, but I'm just asking questions, right? So a sea lion, apparently, is someone that uses the ruse of I'm just asking questions to troll a group. And it had to do with this specific topic. And I was honestly seeking knowledge, but I was called a sea lion because it's someone who plays at being coy or naive that really knows the answer, is just asking questions just to flame up the group, which was not the case. I was prepping for this show and I was injecting some questions into this already running thread, and I was called a sea lion, and of course tribalism kicks in, and then if you're not the first to call me a bad man and to do a laughing emoji on whatever I post, then you're going to be ousted by the rest of the crew. You know what I'm saying? There's a definite tribalism there, and I hesitate to call it virtue signaling, but
See, that's just
know
a
what I'm
weird
talking
term.
about.
I just call those people trolls. If you're pretending to be, if you're just trying to be you're naturally going to stir up some shit. Pardon me. I hope that doesn't get you demonetized. Please cut that out if it does.
We've said rape about 17 times already, so it's already demonetized, my friend.
I'm so sorry.
No.
I just call that a pot stir or a troll. You're just you're looking for a fight. You're looking for an argument with that mentality. And, Tucker, I have enjoyed some of Tucker's commentary. I'm a libertarian, so I'm like, I lean probably more right politically than most of the people here. Maybe, that maybe just be a stereotype I'm putting out, but I've enjoyed some of his canter, but then a lot of it is just blatant. I'm just trying to stir up some trouble. So.
Oh, you are definitely our token right-leaning atheist in this group. For those of you that didn't already know, she's staunch libertarian. That's a different show, though. I think we've had it out. We've already discussed it at length, but there's probably more to talk about.
I always want to say, though, that libertarians, we lean probably further left on social issues than even the leftist. I mean,
like
there's things I believe,
legalization, right?
Marijuana, prostitution, all drugs, legalize it. Do with your body what you want to do with your body. Don't hurt anybody else. It's just we tend to be more conservative on money than the typical leftist. That's all. Mm-hmm. That's the only difference.
I am completely out of questions. We have 15 minutes left. I don't want to start doing final thoughts yet, though. I'm really enjoying this conversation. So is there anything that we've talked about so far, anything that Cindy Forish in her email or anything that's going on in the live chat, maybe catching your eye?
I kind of wanted to comment on what you were saying about, the door, because I have read that in fictional stories, the tough guy always making sure that he had the door covered. But I have never experienced that. My husband was career Army. He was in the Army for 26 years. And yet I have never seen him walk into a restaurant and specifically take the door where he would be facing the exit or anything. Uh, you know,
Watch
I
this,
think.
Kelly. I'm going to ask it to the live chat. Any male specifically, or if you're the dominant, if you take on the protector role in your personal relationship, let me know if that's completely unfounded. I'm telling you, it is a total thing. It is very rare for it not to be that way. I'm saying that your husband might be an outlier, even.
And answering Ralph Ellis, who says being in the Army doesn't necessarily mean beacon of technical expertise. My husband most definitely is into technical expertise. First of all, he was a major. He went through Army command school. He loves playing military strategy games. He has to bend the rules for me, because if we play by the rules of the game, it's not even fun because he just wipes me out so quickly. So he has to change the rules just to make it a game.
I have found this is kind of a tangent. I have found that if your husband was a major, that's an 04. So majors, lieutenant colonels, once you start getting up there, they're thinking theater level, regimental level, big
True,
strategy.
true.
So that's why he's beating your ass at those kind of games, maybe. But guys like me and Ralph Ellis, Jason, he goes by. He's a soldier, but I don't knock him for it.
Hey,
There's an Army and Marine Corps thing. Enlisted folks like us, staff non-commissioned officers, we think at a company level or under, a small unit tactics. I think that's why Jason and I both have severe PTSD, because we get dirty. We're the ones that are getting shelled every other day in Fallujah. We're the ones that do suffer from that hypersensitivity, which goes to where you sit in a restaurant, because doing that over and over as a habit increases hypervigilance. It's called hypervigilance, and it's a bad trait. You don't want to you get burned out from being hypervigilant. So there's a little you don't want to get too far, or it causes stress. So you can try to keep it under control. But yeah, that's a tangent.
Yeah, that's kind of where I was starting to go with this, was that I don't think he's ever considered that situation a threat. And because he does not perceive that as a threat situation, he doesn't see any reason to take any kind of protective action there.
Tracy and Cindy, you were both Army, correct?
Yeah.
Oh no, Cindy, you were a male when you were in the Army, so that doesn't so much apply to you. Tracy, has any of that kind of tactical mindset, protective mindset that you learned in the military, is that transferred over to your daily life now as a civilian?
not daily. I still think sometimes in a certain way, about things. I think maybe where that's my trust issues might come in a little bit. You're kind of always on the prowl, but I wasn't like a down and dirty infantry or actual battle ready soldier. I was in during don't ask, don't tell. I was so it was still very segmented that way, and so my MOS doesn't even exist in the military anymore. I was food services, and I cooked for officers candidates. So the only people that had an easier time in the military than me was the entire Air Force. So yeah. So I think maybe because of my MOS, I was a little less tactical than the average soldier. But maybe that's where my always just try to be aware of my surroundings as much as possible, which may feed into why I won't sit with my back to a door. Now that I think about it.
Heather, we haven't heard. Do you have any thoughts on the subject? I expected so much more fireworks. Not that this is very entertaining show, but I was trying to get a gambit of viewpoints, but we're agreeing with each other way more than I thought.
You're trying to get a cat fight started. Was that your whole?
No. Like I said, it was surprisingly hard to find I'm going to say a pejorative right now because I don't know any other term for it, and I don't mean it as a pejorative. Radical feminist. You know what I'm saying? I couldn't find
You're
any.
trying to find somebody that hates men.
And
Doesn't
they're out
trust
there.
men.
They are
Yeah,
out
they're
there.
out there, and you're trying to find
Yeah.
somebody.
I
Like,
couldn't find
wait,
any that would I found many, but I couldn't find any that would come on to this.
I think what really would have made this more of a fireworks show and had a lot more conflict is if you could have found a man to bring in that believes that the Me Too movement has gone way overboard, that, you know, the men that say, you know, I'm afraid to hire a woman because if I say the wrong thing or do the wrong thing, I'm going to get accused of sexual harassment. I think those are the guys that are really toxic.
yeah.
If you really wanted fireworks, you should have invited an incel. That would have
Yeah.
been fun.
Oh goodness. Yeah.
Yeah.
We would have all ganged up on him. I believe in Me Too, but the caveat, I believe in due process as well.
Yeah.
So when they say, you know, the hashtag believe all women, I have a huge problem with that. I think
No,
Tracy
yeah,
might too.
no.
Maybe we can get some fireworks out of that. Due process, our justice system in the United States of America is the worst justice system on earth, except for every other justice system, if you know what I'm saying. Justice systems suck, but ours is actually, I believe in it. I believe in our due process. So just saying I was sexually assaulted, if it's your
Yes.
word against them, you know, I'm not a lawyer, but I think, and it's so tough in these kind of situations because it's usually you're both alone and there's no eyewitnesses. It's rough, but due process has to prevail, right?
I think a better moniker would be "Hear All Women." Hear
I
them,
like that.
hear
That's
them,
good.
investigate, take every accusation seriously. But I think it goes well beyond due process in a court of law. It goes due process in the court of public opinion because I have friends that have been falsely accused and have had their whole reputation slammed, and for, you know, because no one chose to investigate and it, or you know, or go any route of that. So it cuts both ways, and then I'm sure there's people that get away with it because there wasn't enough investigation. So I think "Hear All Victims," you know, would be a much, or hear all accusations, hear all, I don't know what a what a good moniker would be, but "hear" would have to be part of it, and treat them all seriously, and before we crucify somebody, you know, we're,
Maya, I have to take one point of contention with Maya's comment here. Now, this might be another case of like defund the police where it's just bad wording. And if you would have figured out a nice, concise way to word it better, and like reform the police, that would. When you say defund, there is an actual definition of defund the police, and it means to take away their money, not a little bit. All take away their money. So defund the police, I think, caused more harm than the awareness it tried to raise. And a lot of these hashtags and these catchphrases, I think, are that they shoot themselves in the foot. And so I got to take a little point of contention with Maya. Believe all women doesn't just mean listen to them. Do you guys agree or disagree?
I disagree with you completely. I support Maya completely.
Okay.
And I don't really want to comment on the defund the police unless we bring Maya in here too, because yeah, I don't feel qualified to talk on that, but I know exactly what Maya is talking about. That, you know, we went for too long. We went for too many centuries being told that, you know, we need to keep quiet and just let things be. To, you know, and too many women have told their stories and not been believed and just been cast aside. And I think the law is a pendulum, and whenever it swings too far in one direction, there's always a pull that's going to bring it too far in the other direction, and eventually it will end up at a happy medium. But if you try to pull it to the medium, you're not going to get there. You're only going to get halfway there. And so I wholeheartedly agree with believe all women. You've got to at least start with, until I believe otherwise, until I have reason to believe otherwise, I believe that this witness is telling me the truth. And it's not a matter of due process, because when you're getting an initial report, you're not in court. You know, when police receive an initial report of a crime, their first thought isn't, is this person making this up? It's, I need to investigate this. And so we believe the witness until we have reason to believe otherwise.
Does that go against innocent until proven guilty?
Not at all, because like I said, you're not in court yet. There's been no charges yet.
Okay, so when I hear believe all women, I'm applying it to court proceedings as well. So that's a misnomer. Okay, I see where you're going. Yeah, sure. Yeah, that makes total sense. Okay, I've changed my stance on it. I believe Maya now. I understand where she's going with it now. But when it gets to a court, there's certain procedures, and rule of law
Yes.
is king. Okay, I get it now. What else? What else? Is there anything that we didn't cover yet? Anything? Any loose threads? Any saved grounds? Heather, you've barely spoken, young lady.
What?
You have barely spoken.
I know. Unfortunately, I am so under the weather.
Oh gosh, I'm so sorry.
Oh.
Okay, I hope you
Yeah,
get
I
better.
didn't want to miss this, but I'm still taking my temperature because I so do not want to have COVID. So, but
Have
I
you
was at a
gotten
conference last weekend, so there is a possibility.
Well, if you have taste, that's because since I've had COVID, and my brother got it while he was around me, after I had already had it, and so the first thing I asked him was, "Can you taste?" Like we were sitting down at dinner or whatever. Can you taste what you're eating right now? No. Then you got it. So
I
can you?
still have my taste.
Okay, then you probably don't have it, and that's just a layman talking. But
Nope.
yeah, I was wondering why you were doing an avatar instead of the camera on. Okay, that
I have a
that will
question.
do it. Oh yes, Cindy.
And please excuse me if you think it's a stupid question, but the US has a very specific history with this image of the cowboy who is central in some of the perception of the public, and I'm wondering if there is a difference between toxic masculinity in the US compared to any Western Europe country.
Raise your hand if you've lived in Europe and United States both. I might be the only one. Okay, so I think I'm the one qualified to talk about this. It is definitely a different animal over here. Those 1950s norms, the man in charge and the very religion-centric, woman stays subjugated, it's still very much alive and well over here, more so than Europe. When I lived in Europe, what struck me is that everyone looks kind of the same gender anyway, and everyone's much thinner, and the politeness and the honor system on the mass transit systems, the buses and trains. If you don't have a ticket, you could maybe go your whole life and never get caught if you didn't want to pay for a bus or a train ticket. Everything's honor system over there, and I'm getting off on a tangent. Anyway, it's so and the men. I want to say this in a non-pejorative way. The men seem a little more, from my American perspective, they seem effeminate. They seem more effeminate. But that's a bad way to put it. They seem
less masculine.
They
you
seem
mean?
like there's less of a distinction between male and female over there.
They're less
yeah.
American masculine. Let's say that.
Yes,
Yeah.
there's no machismo over there.
I think it's. I mean, chivalry came from European tradition, in my opinion. I think I think there's a fascination here that we think the good old days are good old days because we didn't live in them. I didn't live in the 50s. I don't want to live in the 50s. I don't want to have to be married to a man to survive. And, any job that I can get is going to pay me peanuts. Whereas I think in Europe, they understand that the Middle Ages and the Dark Ages and the World War II era was not a very good time to be living in. And so they focus maybe more on the here and now than we do.
Jim, do you think that if people like Steve Anderson and Ben Shapiro that are, men got to be men and women got to be women, people in America went to Europe and lived there for a few months, do you think it might soften their attitude when they realize that the gender roles aren't the same?
I've said this a million times. Great question, Granny. You can plot a graph. I was born in California. If I had never left California, and let's say I went to Las Vegas a couple times, so I got California and Nevada, right? And I graduated high school there, and I never left California. You can plot a graph that I am objectively more likely to believe in the same religion as my parents, to adopt all the local customs and not think about anything else, to be less globally thinking, less environmentally conscious. The more you travel, the more the countries you visited or lived in, it exponentially increases your chances of thinking globally, which Fox News being a globalist is a bad thing. Fuck that. It is absolutely a good thing. I guess I've already made my point. You know where I'm going with it.
I think, like Ben Shapiro, it kind of surprises me about him because he's married. I believe his wife is from Israel. I know he's at least been to Israel many times now. This could be a total stereotype on my part, but I believe as far as like masculinity, that the Middle East might have some of the same problems as the U.S. about just an extreme masculine, way of thinking, So I think maybe he's been submerged in both our and their perception of masculinity. And that might be why he hasn't spent a whole lot of time in other places where that's not the case. Whereas like Steven Anderson, I'm sure you're talking about Quiverful Steven Anderson, right?
Mhm.
Okay. Yeah. He's just nuts.
I was
He is
having a
so
good day
far. I've
until
done
she
like
mentioned
in-depth dive on
him.
him. He's just totally misogynistic. Sure. Don't get me started.
Cindy, you live in Belgium now. You speak French. I suppose you've lived all over Europe, I'm guessing.
France, Spain, Belgium, and Luxembourg.
Wow, that's see, and
well, visited or lived.
Yeah, that lends to your, I've said it before. Just the more places, if you can just get outside your bubble and see what other cultures, at the very least, it gives you empathy. You might still be whoever you are, but it gives you empathy. It lets you see, you see the other side of the fence. I don't know.
Yeah, it gives you perspective.
Perspective. Yeah. All right, guys, let's do we'll go backwards this time. We'll start with Cindy and just plug everywhere where people, now Cindy especially, the smallest YouTube channel here, she needs your support. Go and subscribe to Path to Reason. So tell us where to find it, and do you have any other social media outlets? And final thoughts.
Yeah, I can give my link tree. It's a link. So I don't remember exactly the address, although I have it here.
Send it to me private, and I'll put it in you guys in the live chat. Everyone's main channel is in the description section. And Heather, I think I put your Facebook on there instead.
Yeah. So yeah, my YouTube channel is youtube.com/c/the path to reason. Yeah, basically I talk about critical thinking, which is my main topic of interest. Sometimes I do shows in French, sometimes in English, depending on what topic it addresses. But yeah, basically that's it.
Okay, I copied that link tree, and after the show, I'll put that in the description. Okay, Heather, number one question, when are you going to start your YouTube channel? And And any final thoughts? Heather, you know,
You're muted,
she's under
Heather.
you're muted, Heather.
Oh,
Oh boy. Anyway,
wow.
let me
She
do
might
it
have
for
had an
her.
internet issue.
Yeah.
Yes. Yeah. In the in here in Texas, it's not a religious thing to say "bless your heart," and it's usually it's meant as pejorative, like "oh, you're an idiot." Oh, bless your heart. But bless her heart, she's under the weather. So, okay. So Heather, she's one Texas gal on Twitter. You can find her there. And I think I posted a link in the description section where you can get in touch with her. If you are a content creator, like someone like Neil, the 604 atheist, and you're looking for a good deconversion story, a very recent one, very fresh, open wound. She was a Christian 6 months ago. So that would be a good guest for you to book. Let's see. Tracy, Keto and Crime.
Yeah, I run Keto and Crime. It's true crime, history, some pop culture, but for the most part, history and true crime. So, though my atheism slips in quite a bit, but because I do a lot of cults, but yeah, come on over there. I'd love to have you. I do white collar and murders, so it's not all just murders and blood and gore and stuff like that. And I would love to collab with any of the creators here if there's a subject you're interested in. If you'd like to do a true crime case or even just come on and chit chat, I'd love to have you on.
I have a bone to pick with you, Tracy, before we go. About, oh gosh, it was maybe around the holidays. You asked me to come on a show and you said, let's talk about, because you do not only book reviews, you do sometimes movie reviews. And we did an Alfred Hitchcock one together. Then you said, hey, let's do one on Soylent Green and Logan's Run. And I hadn't
Yeah.
seen them in a while, even though my parents were cast extras in Logan's Run. And I can point them out. They're at the final scene. It was filmed in the Fort Worth Water Gardens. So I went back and watched them, but I didn't have the streaming service to do it. So I paid $3.99 per. So I spent $8 to take multiple pages of notes for this show that has still yet to happen.
I got so busy. I'm also self-employed. I run an admin business, so I've had so many clients, which is a great problem to have.
Excuses. Anyway,
it just got snowed under, but we will do that. I promise you,
okay.
October
Soylent Green and
for my
Logan's
31
Run.
days of Halloween, we will do that. I promise.
I'm just kind of busting your stones a little bit, but that would be fun though. Yes, Keto and Crime, really fun. If you like my wife, she's addicted to the, I call it murder porn, the investigative discovery and all the, who done it kind of stuff. That's what her show, and it's really good stuff. Godless Granny, final thoughts, and where can we find you?
Final thoughts, just I'm still learning how to human, and I'm 60 years old. So, I think all of us are just kind of figuring this out as we go along. But one of the things I do have to say is, the men that I have met in the atheist community are by far kinder and gentler than the men that I used to know in the Christian community. I find far less toxic masculinity in the atheist community. My channel, Godless Granny, I do a lot of reaction to apologists, debunking of apologist and theistic arguments, but I'm also a trans parent, and so I do a lot of trans rights and women's rights, obviously, since I'm a woman. I'm a retired attorney, so I do tend to do a lot of commentary on legislation.
And you are ace, and we have never talked about it on our show. I would love to do something spotlighting that, like unorthodox. Is that a good way to put it? Unorthodox sexual proclivities.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that might be a fun show too.
I
Okay,
tried
guys.
to do an ACES.
Yeah.
I tried to do an ACES panel once, and it kind of bombed. I some of the people I had on were not content creators, and they weren't used to being on streams, and it was a little difficult to draw them out.
Yeah, it's an interesting topic. Thank you, guys. That will do it. Okay, now you guys know what to do. Look in the description section and please subscribe to these fine people. And that will do it. I'll see you all next time.